The story starts with a rock, a lonely, windswept rock in the middle of a cold sea. It's called Eilean Mor, one of the Flannan Isles, about 20 miles west of the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. It's not a friendly place. It's a place of cliffs and spray and screaming gulls. For centuries, sailors feared it. They called the islands the Seven Hunters. They had strange superstitions about the place. Shepherds who took their sheep there for summer grazing would never stay the night. They said the ground was haunted. But by the end of the 19th century, progress was coming to these wild places. Shipping lanes were getting busier. Ships needed light to guide them. So the Northern Lighthouse Board built a lighthouse on Eilean Mor. It was a marvel of Victorian engineering, a tall, white tower standing against the worst the Atlantic could throw at it. It was finished in 1899. Its light first shone out across the dark water on December 7th of that year. It was a beacon of safety and order in a world of chaos. The lighthouse needed men to run it, 3 men at a time. They worked in shifts, living in the sturdy stone quarters built beside the tower. It was a tough job. The isolation was immense. For 6 weeks at a time, your only company was 2 other men, the sea and the sky. Then, a relief ship would arrive, bringing supplies, mail, and a fresh keeper to rotate in. In December of 1900, the 3 men on Eilean Mor were Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur. Ducat was the principal keeper. He was 43, a seasoned veteran of the lighthouse service. He was married with 4 children. This was his life. Marshall was the second assistant. He was 28 and had a young family waiting for him back on the mainland. The third man was Donald MacArthur. He was an occasional keeper, meaning he was filling in for another man who was on sick leave. He was 40, a tough, brawling man from the Isle of Lewis, a former soldier. He was known for having a quick temper. These 3 men were responsible for the light. It was their one vital duty. Every night, without fail, the great lamp had to be lit. Its beam had to cut through the darkness, a warning, and a guide. And for the first year of its operation, it did. Then, on December 15th, 1900, something went wrong. The steamer Archer, on its way from Philadelphia to Leith, passed the Flannan Isles in the dead of night. Its crew looked for the familiar flash from Eilean Mor, but there was nothing. Just darkness where a powerful light should have been. When the ship docked in Scotland a few days later, the captain reported it to the authorities. But due to some administrative mix-up, the message wasn't passed on to the Northern Lighthouse Board immediately. For several more days, no one knew the light was out. The relief ship, the Hesperus, was scheduled to visit Eilean Mor around December 20th. But the weather was terrible. A huge storm had been raging across the North Atlantic. The kind of storm that makes even the most experienced sailors nervous. The ship, captained by a man named Jim Harvey, had to wait in port on the Isle of Lewis. For days, the wind howled and the sea churned. It wasn't until Boxing Day, December 26th, that the weather cleared enough to make the journey. As the Hesperus steamed towards Eilean Mor, the mood on board was probably a mix of relief and anticipation. Joseph Moore, the relief keeper, was looking forward to seeing his colleagues and starting his shift. Captain Harvey was just glad to be on his way, but as they got closer to the island, a feeling of unease began to creep in. The island looked still, too still. Normally, when the relief boat arrived, the keepers would be waiting at the landing stage. A flag would be flying from the flagpole. The supply box would be ready to be restocked. But there was nothing. No flag, no men on the cliff, just the white tower, silent against the gray sky. Captain Harvey blew the ship's whistle. The sound echoed off the cliffs and died. No response. He ordered a flare to be fired. It shot into the air, a bright streak of red. Still nothing. A deep sense of dread settled over the crew. Something was very wrong. The sea was still rough, making it too dangerous to dock at the main landing stage on the east side. So Harvey navigated the Hesperus around to the west side, where there was a second, more sheltered landing. Joseph Moore, the relief keeper, got into a small dinghy. He was rowed to the shore. He was the first person to set foot on Eilean Mor since the men had vanished. He climbed the steep stone steps carved into the cliff face. Every step would have felt heavy. The silence was absolute, broken only by the waves and the seabirds. He reached the top and walked towards the lighthouse compound. He saw the gate to the compound was closed. The main door to the living quarters was also closed. But it wasn't locked. He pushed it open and stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the cold. The fire in the hearth was long dead. It felt as if no one had been there for days. In the kitchen, a meal of salted mutton and potatoes was sitting on the table, untouched. A chair was knocked over, as if someone had stood up in a great hurry. The clock on the wall had stopped. He went into the keeper's bedrooms. The beds were made. Everything was neat and tidy. Nothing seemed out of place. He went up the winding stairs into the lighthouse tower itself. In the lamp room, everything was in perfect order. The lamp was cleaned and refilled with oil, ready to be lit. The great lenses were polished. The men had clearly completed their duties before whatever happened. But the men themselves were gone. Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, Donald MacArthur. They had vanished. One crucial detail struck Mor. In the entranceway, he saw the keepers' coats and boots. 2 sets of yellow oilskins, the heavy-duty waterproof gear they wore in foul weather, were missing. One set, belonging to Donald MacArthur, was still hanging on its peg. This was strange. The rules of the lighthouse service were strict. No man was to go outside onto the cliff tops during a storm without his oilskins. It was suicide. Why would one man, especially in the middle of a brutal North Atlantic winter, go outside in just his shirt sleeves? Shaken, Mor ran back down to the landing and signaled to the Hesperus. He told them the keepers were gone. 2 more sailors were sent ashore to help with a search. They scoured the small island. It didn't take long. There aren't many places to hide on Eilean Mor. They searched every crevice, every cliff edge. They found nothing. No bodies, no clues, just an empty, silent island. Captain Harvey sent a telegram back to the mainland. The message was stark. A dreadful accident has happened at Flannan's. The 3 keepers, Ducat, Marshall, and the Occasional, have disappeared from the island. The clocks were stopped, and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows, they must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane or something like that. The news caused a sensation. How could 3 experienced men simply disappear from a tiny, isolated rock? The Northern Lighthouse Board immediately dispatched its superintendent, Robert Muirhead, to investigate. Muirhead was a practical, no-nonsense man. He wasn't interested in superstition or wild theories. He was there to find facts. He arrived on Eilean Mor on December 29th. He conducted a meticulous examination of the entire compound. He confirmed everything Joseph Mor had reported. The untouched meal, the stopped clock, the single set of oilskins left behind. He then turned his attention to the area around the landing stages. On the west landing, the one Mor had used, he found significant evidence of the storm's power. Here, a supply box, which had been secured to the rock with an iron railway, had been smashed to pieces. Its contents were strewn across the cliff. The iron railway itself was twisted and bent out of shape. A lifebuoy that had been fixed to the cliff face 110 feet above sea level was gone. Muirhead noted that the damage was on the west side, even though the worst of the recent storm had come from that direction. It suggested the waves that hit the island were colossal, capable of surging high up the cliff. Muirhead's job was to piece together a plausible timeline. For that, he had one critical piece of evidence, the lighthouse logbook. The logbook was the official record of life at the lighthouse. In it, the principal keeper, James Ducat, would have recorded daily weather conditions, the state of the lamp, and any unusual occurrences. The entries leading up to the disappearance were professional and routine. They noted the weather, the wind direction, and the work done. The last entry was made at 9 a.m. on the morning of December 15th. It was a single line, storm ended, sea calm, got his overall. After that, the log was blank. The slate where keepers would jot down notes before transferring them to the main log was also wiped clean for the next day. This suggested the men vanished sometime on the afternoon or evening of December 15th. This matched the report from the steamer Arctur, which had seen the light was out that same night. Based on his findings, Muirhead formulated the official explanation. It remains the most widely accepted theory to this day. He concluded that the men were victims of a freak wave. His hypothesis went something like this. On the afternoon of December 15th, after the great storm had supposedly passed, Marshall and Ducat went down to the western landing stage. They likely went to check on the supply crate and secure the crane, worried about the damage from the storm. They would have been wearing their oilskins while they were working near the cliff edge. A massive, unexpected wave, a rogue wave, surged up out of the calmer sea. It crashed over the landing stage, sweeping both men into the ocean instantly. Back in the lighthouse, Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper, would have been waiting. Maybe he was the one in the kitchen getting the meal ready. When his colleagues didn't return, he would have gotten worried. He would have run outside to see what was wrong. In his panic, he didn't stop to put on his coat or oilskins. He ran down to the cliff edge, saw his companions struggling in the water, or perhaps saw no sign of them at all. And then another giant wave came and took him too. This theory accounts for most of the evidence. It explains why all 3 men were outside, it explains the damage to the western landing, and it explains why one set of oilskins was left behind. It was a tragic accident, a testament to the raw, unpredictable power of the sea. Muirhead's official report stated his belief that the men had been swept away by a wave of exceptional size. For the Northern Lighthouse Board, the case was closed, but for the public, the story was just beginning. And many people weren't satisfied with Muirhead's tidy explanation. Questions remained. Why would 2 experienced keepers go down to the landing stage together during such dangerous conditions? The rules stated one man should always remain in the tower, and why would a man as tough and experienced as MacArthur run out into the teeth of an Atlantic winter without his coat? it didn't seem right. And so other theories began to emerge, ranging from the plausible to the utterly fantastic. One of the more grounded alternative theories was that the men had fought. Perhaps the intense isolation had finally taken its toll. 3 men, cooped up in a tiny space for weeks on end, could easily get on each other's nerves. Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper, had a reputation for being a hothead. The story goes that he and Marshall got into a vicious fight near the cliff edge. Ducat, the senior keeper, tried to intervene. In the struggle, all 3 fell or were pushed into the sea. The overturned chair in the kitchen was seen as evidence of a sudden, violent confrontation. This theory is dramatic, but it has problems. A search of the lighthouse found no signs of a struggle. No blood, no broken furniture besides the one chair. Everything was orderly. And if there was a murder, it seems unlikely the killer would have been able to dispose of 2 bodies and then himself without leaving a single trace. Still, the idea of cabin fever leading to tragedy has a powerful psychological appeal. As the years passed, the story of the Flannan Isles became a legend, and with legend comes embellishment. The facts of the case became twisted and embroidered with fantastical details. The most significant of these fabrications concerned the lighthouse logbook. Decades after the event, a story began to circulate about a series of strange, terrifying logbook entries that were supposedly found by Muirhead, but covered up. These fabricated entries painted a much more chilling picture of the keeper's final days. One entry, supposedly from December 12th, read, "Gale north by northwest, sea lashed to fury, never seen such a storm, Marshall is very quiet, Ducat has been praying." Another, from December 13th, said, "Storm continued through the night, wind shifted west, Ducat is quiet, Marshall is crying." The most famous fake entry was for December 15th, just before the vanished storm ended sea calm. God is over all. This last line was actually real, but in the context of the fake entries, it took on a sinister, final-sounding tone. These entries were pure fiction. They likely originated in a 1920s poem or a fictional short story, but they were so compelling that they became part of the accepted lore. They transformed the story from a tragic maritime accident into a psychological horror tale. They suggested the men weren't just battling a storm outside, but a storm of fear and madness within. Was it the storm that made Marshall cry and Ducat pray, or was it something else? Something on the island with them? This is where the supernatural theories took hold. The old superstitions about Eilean Mor were revived. Some said the men were taken by the Phantom of the Seven Hunters, an ancient ghost said to sail a boat crewed by spirits. Others whispered that they had been captured by a sea monster, a kraken, that rose from the depths. Local folklore on the Isle of Lewis spoke of the little people, fairies or spirits who were hostile to intruders on their land. Had the keepers somehow angered them? In more modern times, these theories were updated. The men were abducted by aliens. They were taken by foreign spies in a submarine who wanted to test a secret weapon. The list goes on. Each theory reflects the anxieties of its time, but none of them have a shred of evidence to support them. They are simply stories, spun to fill the vacuum of the unknown. The truth is likely much simpler, and in a way, much more terrifying. The official explanation, the rogue wave, remains the most logical. Rogue waves are no longer the stuff of sailors' myths. They are a documented scientific reality. They are waves of immense size and power that can form unexpectedly, even in seas that are relatively calm. A wave 100 feet high crashing onto the cliffs of Eilean Mor is not just possible, it's probable. We can imagine the scene. The main storm has passed, the sky is clearing, Ducat and Marshall, diligent and responsible, decide to check for damage at the land. They've seen 100 storms, they feel safe, but they have never seen a wave like the one that is building silently out in the Atlantic. It rears up, a moving wall of water, and hits the cliff with unimaginable force. They are gone in an instant. Inside, MacArthur hears the crash, he feels the ground shake. He runs to the door, his heart pounding. He looks out and sees nothing but churning white water where his friends should be. He doesn't think. He just acts. He runs out, coatless, shouting their names, his voice lost in the roar. And then the sea comes for him too. This version is not as exciting as a ghost story or an alien abduction, but it speaks to a more profound truth, the awesome and indifferent power of nature. In the battle between 3 men on a rock in the full force of the North Atlantic, there was only ever going to be one winner. The mystery of the Flannan Isles endures not because it is complex, but because it is simple. It's about emptiness. An empty lighthouse, an empty table, an empty island. There were no witnesses, there were no survivors, there were no bodies ever recovered. All we have is a stage where a tragedy occurred and the actors have vanished. The story has been told and retold countless times. It inspired a haunting poem by Wilfred Wilson Gibson, Flannan Isle, which helped popularize the myth of the overturned chair and the untouched meal. It was the subject of an opera and songs by rock bands. A 2018 film called The Vanishing offered a fictionalized account based on the murder theory. The Eilean Mor lighthouse was remanned just a few weeks after the tragedy. New keepers were brought in, and the light shone out once more. For the next 7 decades, men continued to live and work on that lonely rock, always in the shadow of what happened in 1900. They must have looked at the western landing and wondered. They must have felt the chill on stormy nights. The lighthouse was finally automated in 1971. Today, it stands empty of people. Its light is controlled from miles away. It is a silent monument on a silent island. So, why did the lighthouse keepers vanish from the Flannan Isles? The most honest answer is that we will never know for sure. The only 3 people who knew the truth were carried away by the sea. All we have is a collection of clues, an official report, and a century of speculation. But the most likely answer is also the most humbling. They vanished because they were men doing a dangerous job in a dangerous place. They were professional, brave, and diligent. And on one December afternoon, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They weren't taken by ghosts or monsters, they were taken by the sea. It was a foe they knew and respected, but one whose full power they could never have anticipated. Their story is a stark reminder that even in a world of beacons and technology, the wild places of the earth still hold the power to claim us in an instant, leaving behind nothing but an enduring and chilling mystery.